Hello, friends. Welcome back to Great People Interview Series. How many times you have heard AI these days? Right? Well, almost every day? Yes. And would you like to talk to a man who is an expert in generative AI? Well, let's welcome Edward Morris from Enigmatica, which is his company. He's the CEO. Welcome, Edward.
Thank you. It's nice to be here.
Fantastic. Well, just before we dive into the topic itself, just tell us about your journey.
So I come from a quite interesting background, which I think has actually worked in my favor. For a little bit of context, I got into the AI field probably just after the ChatGPT boom of 2022 in November. But it was before that I had an interest in AI from a more ethics perspective and where is it going, and sort of an interest like many other people. But I was working in copywriting, marketing, these sorts of areas that you wouldn't traditionally expect to find people who now work in AI. But as it would turn out, my expertise in talking to people and conversing with people panned out to be quite useful in the AI field because of the way that generative AI works. So I transitioned over. I more or less said my career in copywriting, I'm going to shelve it, which is quite ironic because I now do more copywriting than ever before. And I'm going to focus entirely on AI. And so I've never looked back since. And so I've had the fortune of working with some of the biggest companies in the world. I've also worked with charities, SMEs, and I've also worked with large AI companies as well. And it's been an incredible journey so far of what seems to be very, very short.
Fantastic. Of course, you have, varied experience in the field of AI. And let's talk about your business right now, your core focus right now, which is, say, AI consultancy. Um, uh, could you just give us a more of an understanding of what exactly you do in there?
Yeah. So I think potentially it will be useful for the listeners to understand what consultancy is from an AI perspective, because it's a really confusing term at the moment because it's thrown around so much.
Yeah.
So for me, what I tend to do is I tend to go into a company who wants to install AI within the company or implement it, whatever you want to use as a word. And I give them advice on how best to implement it, because typically these companies want to be considered AI first, or they want to be seen as futuristic or indeed be futuristic, but they have no idea on how to go about that. But the difference is that where consultants, especially people like Deloitte, EY in the top four, may have advice, that advice is really coming from the same sources that I read. So when a company calls me in, or Deloitte, or indeed one of the big four, what they're really looking for is an answer of how best they can utilize AI, which is essentially what I try and go in and try and tell them to do, as well as tempering their expectations of what's possible. Certain companies might already have AI in place, and if they do have it in place, usually it's something like Microsoft Copilot because of the security settings behind Microsoft Copilot, or it'll be ChatGPT Enterprise, one of the enterprise models from Google. And if they do have something like that installed, typically they've done it because they want that capability within the company, but they don't quite know how to harness it, which is where I come in, offering some solutions, or potentially just listening to their staff members and then providing those solutions. So that's essentially what my company does in a nutshell. It's those two major offerings, with more and more growing each and every single day.
Wow, fantastic. Well, uh, then these companies who want to go full blown with AI and want to have AI first and they're part of their strategy and they want to be talking about, hey, we got AI, we using AI. Um, where should they start? Any company who wants to
Hmm.
adopt AI, where do they start?
I think the first thing you've got to consider as a company is, unlike many things that have come our way over time, let's sort of walk back a bit. Let's think Web3, let's think NFTs, let's think cryptocurrency, and we kind of keep on going back. The difference between AI and what we have seen in the past is that AI exists to emulate one specific thing, and that's a human being. So really, as a company, what you should be asking is, well, number one, why do you want AI in the first place, and what are you supposed to be using that AI for? Are there processes that you're using that AI for? And is there any sort of way that you can implement the AI within the company and provide a tangible benefit? It's not always a case that it translates directly into money. However, it can translate into time. And if it translates into time, then it can translate into money as well, where you can put your tasks and focus other people on other areas. So I think the very first question a company has to ask is why they want it in the first place. I think many companies kind of want to project this persona of we are forward thinking and we are in the future. But I think in order to actually be in the future, you have to be in the future. You can't just want it. And first step is always put the people first. If you can find errors in the company where people are potentially doing things which would be considered grunt work, repetitive processes, and you think this can be alleviated with AI, or potentially it's something we want to get rid of, then that's where you would call in an AI consultant, and they can walk you through what the steps actually would be to get that alleviation. That would be my first step for a company. If a company's already got the AI installed, I think it's a case of figuring out what AI they have, and 9 out of 10 times, realistically, it is Microsoft Copilot, and then figuring out what you can do with it to alleviate some burden off of some of the users, which it can be anything from making an agent within Copilot to draft documents or draft certain summaries, all the way to making decision level executions with AI itself, which can be quite useful depending on the team. So it's really a whole can of worms. It depends on the company ultimately, but I would say the very first and most important thing is humans first. And as long as you get that correct, your AI implementation will go a lot smoother than you would think.
Fantastic. Well, let's now that you use the term Microsoft Copilot, let's try and understand from some of your experiences. What's obviously there are many AI solutions out there, and now that we're just talking about Microsoft Copilot, what are its strengths, and when do you think, or if you have an example of, for these kind of solutions, Copilot is the one to use, and maybe this is an example where you should not be using Copilot, if there is any such example.
Yeah, of course. It's an interesting one, because when you go into a company, if they've already got Microsoft Copilot embedded in their ecosystem, 9 out of 10 times, it's because they've wanted that AI capability without necessarily the commitment behind the AI capability. And when I say that, it's because when you do the AI implementation, there's a lot you have to consider. There's governance, there's bad press, of course, because of the human replacement discussions. There's the case of what you actually need it for. There's all sorts of questions you can ask. But I think most companies implement Copilot because they know it's integrated into Microsoft Word, Excel. It can implement into Azure, and Azure is where you'll start seeing more applications, so harder automations with more data protection and that kind of area. But it really does depend on the company and what they're after. I think, personally speaking, I have a bit of a love-hate relationship with Microsoft Copilot. I think the team behind Microsoft are great people, but I think even they would agree that Microsoft Copilot definitely does have its shortcomings. Sadly, quite a lot of the shortcomings, which I would love to discuss, are very much locked and keyed behind a closed door because they're proprietary to the clients that I work with. But I can give you an example. And one of the examples, of course, is just the way that Copilot answers your questions tends to be a lot more rigid compared to something like, let's say, ChatGPT. And I think if you're a smaller company, let's say 10 to 20 employees or less even, you should first take a step back and really consider what you would want Copilot for in the first place. Because if it's just easy integration, I don't think that's a good enough reason. If instead you want to play with AI and see what you can do with it, I would actually suggest going to ChatGPT, picking up an enterprise subscription and using that instead. And the reason for that is because it's a lot nicer to use compared to Microsoft Copilot. And if it's your first time into AI, you want this to be a quite simple and easy experience. And sometimes Copilot just doesn't provide that experience, which is quite ironic, really, because it does lead us back to the first point of people first. The main purpose of AI is to remove the grunt work. And if you're not removing the grunt work and you're just doing more and more different types of work, then you're just creating more work, but this time it's AI based. So I would say for Copilot, in terms of strengths, data protection, of course, that's the top one. And I think that's why most people in decision-making capacities make that choice. But if you're willing to take the risk, I would say instead consider ChatGPT Enterprise and get your employees to use that in the interim. And the data is still protected. It's still behind ChatGPT or OpenAI's closed doors. And you get a real taste of what the world of AI is like without the strings attached, let's say. So you still have that security there, and you still have that confidence there that your data isn't going to go anywhere. But that would be my advice, I would say. I think a lot of companies, sadly, they do gravitate towards Copilot because Copilot just seems like a sensible choice. And potentially it is on paper, but if you want innovation, Copilot probably wouldn't be my first port of call.
Wow, fantastic. And other than these, have you had any other tools that you had to implement or suggest the companies to implement, other than ChatGPT and Copilot?
Yeah, quite a few. I mean, again, it really does depend on the company, but I think from a modern corporate perspective, most companies are dealing with large language models like Copilot and ChatGPT, and that's about 95% of my work. And the 5% that are the outliers, there's vibe coding products such as Lovable, Replit, there's automation like NA10, there's all sorts of things, and it really does depend on the company. I think the most unique use case I've had so far is I've helped a radio station with AI matters. And what originally started as just like large language model implementation, it ended up becoming AI generated speeches, AI generated adverts, and AI generated things, sorts of things you would never consider. But of
Wow,
course, because
yeah,
it's radio, yeah, they started using it because for the listener, maybe it's easier to understand this way, because if you think about it, one, you have to write the script manually, that will take time, then you have
yeah,
to get it approved, and then you have to get it recorded, then you have to do the editing process, then you have to go through all of the tick boxes. But if you just have an AI that does automatically, you've saved, well, hours worth of time, potentially days, depending. I mean, even from another large language model perspective, but just because we're talking about the flexibility of the AI usage, if we're talking charities, bid writing is a really big one. And that takes potentially months worth of time because you have to write these long bids, you have to adhere to their questions, you have to get an understanding of their rules and regulations and what they're looking for. But if you have a concept and you're a charity worker, 9 out of 10 times, there's no one who wants to work in the admin department. So what happens is you end up usually by yourself with maybe another team member writing this bid or proposal, which is designed to keep your charity alive. But it's taking months and months and months. And then you have to wait for a conclusion or a solution to whether or not you're going to get that money from the bid in the first place. This takes a lot of time. However, with an AI agent, you can basically copy and paste your concept into it and get a fully written bid and proposal in about 2 to 3 days. That's including the editing and oversight from human people. So I think, again, it's all about the time saving side of things. And just the people who have actually done the bid writing things and themselves have been successful and have actually been awarded money for it. So there's definitely ways to do it. It just depends on the company and what they're after, really.
wow, fantastic. Well, that's a lot that's happening with
Yeah.
AI. And as you gave so many examples, so many companies adopting AI, different solutions, different problems, and the likes of you are helping those companies to figure out the right strategy and fit the AI into the right boxes, so they succeed, they are more productive, and so on. From here on, what's next?
It's funny because I anecdotally, I was the proud recipient of an award from my university early this year. And that was at some point, I think February or March, and it was the Rising Star Award. And
Wow.
essentially what that is it's a personal one for me. It's not like a massive it's because I didn't particularly think I was going to amount to much from university, so to get an award is a quite personal thing. But I was sat at this table, and at the table it was a mixture of executives, and I think I can talk about it. One of them was a marketing manager from Philip Morris, and there was another person who ran a legal firm, and I think another one who ran a legal firm as well as members from the university who sat with me. And they had the same question that you have, which is, where is it all going? And my answer to that in February was agents, agentics, automation. That's probably where it's going to go, because at the moment there's human intervention before the AI does anything.
Yeah.
And I think my answer still firmly remains almost the same. But as time has gone on, you would be amazed how many people aren't fully aware of what AI is capable of. And I had to remind myself that the people who are in my field are within almost their own little world. And when we talk about AI, it's from the perspective of people who are using AI every single day. So it's interesting when we think about where it's going, because automation would still be the likely answer, but the way that automation looks is completely different. And if you've worked in finance, or you've worked in anywhere that deals with a lot of admin work and paperwork, if you get forms through the door from people who, let's say, if it's finance, they want to withdraw their pension, then you'll know there's a tick box exercise, and people are going through that every single day. There's no form of automation there at all. So if an AI could look at that paper and read through it and then fill out the documents instead, that would be a good form of automation. Yes, you'd be removing a lot of grunt work, but the admins who are taking their time to do this instead of tackling the more difficult cases would have their time alleviated, which provides a better customer service for the end user. And it's stuff like this which is so important, because I think that's where AI is going. And I think the concept of automation as we know it is probably going to change into something a bit more, for lack of a better word, natural. So you would give an AI a task, an admin, you would train it on how to do a job, and it would just do the job and think about things and do it on the fly, rather than as we know it currently, which is if A equals B, then equals C. So it's going to move away from that, and instead it's going to think for itself.
Wow, fantastic. And in terms of your own work, what's your goal? What's your plan for next 1, 2, 3 years from now? How do you see yourself growing?
I don't know. It's so, this field moves so quickly. It's ridiculous. In the past 6 weeks, we have seen more development in the AI sphere than we saw for an entire year. And that's in the 6 weeks. We've seen Google release the world's most advanced models. We've seen it breaking AGI tests. We've seen it doing all sorts of things. And that's just one area. And of course, there are other companies doing other things. OpenAI is definitely cooking something up in the background. And other companies that don't deal with that, let's say Sonu, which generates music, is getting better day by day, signing agreements with large record labels. And generally, the world of AI is evolving so quickly that just keeping on top of it is a job in itself. So I think when we talk about 3 years, it's a mind-blowing question, because in just those 6 weeks, we've seen developments that would usually take a year in a 6-week window, which makes me wonder, in about 3 years, how much further is that going to be? And I think this is almost what's scary about the field of AI, is that just grasping it is hard. And that's from a professional standpoint. As a normal average person who doesn't use AI on the daily, or maybe occasionally, they are still in the era of ChatGPT, large language models and stuff like that, which is totally fine. But even just going on to Instagram this morning and looking at reels, I saw there was this wonderful reel about a lady making empanadas. And I thought, wow, that's a good recipe. And she's talking great English. And I looked at the bottom of my screen, I could see AI dubbed. It was the whole thing took her voice, used AI to turn Spanish into English, and then it matched up with her lip movements so that you could understand the video you were watching. And most people in the comment section didn't even realize it at the time. And you get to the very bottom, there's a comment with about 193 likes, and it says, wow, I didn't realize this was an AI dubbed video. So I think in 3 years, where do I see myself? I'm not too sure, but where do I see the world? I mean, language barriers are going to disappear. That much is almost a guarantee. And the concept of what it means to be human is probably going to be called into debate, because AI is at the point where it's indistinguishable from most human output. And I don't think that's even up for debate anymore, especially after the Google News passing AGI tests. And I think ultimately in 3 years, we won't really know where we are. I think, to be honest with you, I think most experts who are in my current position would have a more or less the same answer, which is we just don't know. So all you can really do is read the news and keep on adapting, but that's all you can do. Predicting where it moves next is pretty much an impossibility.
Amazing, amazing. I think, that's the kind of truth we live in. We don't know where it's going. It's going too fast, we know. We know the direction it's taken. And, amazing to know different perspectives to this. And of course, your insights have been really, really useful. Um, I guess, with your knowledge on AI, we probably need a much bigger format to talk about this. And this interview, because of its time limit, has to come to a point now. But thank you so much for your time, Edward.
My pleasure. I love talking about this stuff. Could talk about it for hours, but I'm sure your listeners wouldn't appreciate me
Yeah,
yapping for
I
hours.
think live interaction is obviously is something, we could do a webinar, and I think, that's where people are live, and they could probably spend a little more time in Great People interview series. We have this limited time where we get the glimpse of your knowledge, but that in itself is very useful. We covered lots of grounds, and I think audience is definitely geared up to do something in AI if they haven't started already. And if they're wondering whether they are right or wrong, they know someone who can, help them out. So it's been a very useful time. It's been great to talk to you, Edward. Thank you so much once again.
Thank you too. It's been a pleasure.
Cheers. Bye.